and get rest for
Mm-hmm.
the next day. For the next day is big because it's all your body's moving while you're moving at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That makes sense to me. Lauren says, is a business owner making a lot of money and using the money as a tool going against uniform? Lauren, I don't see the principle in any of that. A business owner could be just, you know, doing their business. And what we talk about sometimes is personal power. And personal power is a result of intention and will. There are areas of people's lives where they have a lot of attention and will. Does that make sense? Lauren, have you seen where there are people in certain areas of their lives, they have a lot of confidence, a lot of, you can see the personal power, just do, they know they can. That is not necessarily what we're doing though, because there are also people who have the ability to focus in a relaxed way on one thing, but it's not encompassing. Does that make sense, Lauren? So they could be using, remember, these are principles of nature. I'm not making this shit up. So the way that I describe it, I'm making that up. Does that make sense? The description, the way that I'm describing it is somewhat made up and unique to me, but what I'm describing is going to be similar in the human experience. And so one of the things that we're talking about is the accumulation of what I call personal power. And there are other people who call it that, but it is a type of confidence. Remember, if the confidence is really there, you're not going to question it. Ida, if you're very confident that you can cross the street, are you going to sit there and question it the whole way? You know, or you're not really confident if you're questioning it, right?
You've got lots of areas in your life where you've accumulated personal power and you're
Mm-hmm.
good at something,
Right.
and you sometimes I find it hard to believe that somebody can't cook, or the basic things that to me are basic. And
Mm-hmm.
of course there's other things that other people can do, and I look at in wonderment and think, how can they do that? But it
Mm-hmm.
is, like you say, accumulated, and then you're
Right.
confident about those things but not confident about other things.
Right. Yeah. So let's say Jerry is like a master programmer. She's been to school for 20 years and she's been doing it for 10 years, and she's at the top of her profession. When it comes to computing and programming, she has just do energy. It's intention, it's will, it's clear, it's focused. She knows what she's doing, she knows how to do it. Now what we're doing, Lauren, is we're taking those principles and we're applying it to our entire life experience so that we have peace first, so that we're not an amazing computer programmer who's creating a miserable life experience, or a successful, in air quotes, successful at business, a successful business owner making a lot of money, and they're using this money, as a tool of this, that, and the other thing. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they have any peace, any happiness, any joy, any of that deepness that we're talking about. But then again, they could. Do you see what I mean? Because we're talking about principles of nature, not opinions of the human mind. So freedom isn't in having money or not having money or having a successful business. It's being able to have or not have and still have the peace and still have the freedom. If that's a person's interest, so be it. Does that make sense, Lauren? And that kind of removes the judgment factor as well. Like, it's not my place to judge what they're doing, but you can kind of see when somebody has personal power accumulated in an area. Does that make sense? Any questions? Does that lead to another question, or?
I was just going to comment
Mhm.
a little bit about what you just said. Just noticing for myself, um, and don't laugh because I know I shared something with you the other day that's an old battleground, but it was so much shorter, and just shifted, can do, came up with a different plan. If what you're doing isn't working, why the hell are you still doing it? That kind of stuff. But anyway, what I was going to say was, for me, I'm just noticing a lot of, maybe not noticing, but I'm just aware of, there's just so much that isn't there anymore. I mean, things just fall away where you might have spent days or maybe an hour reacting. That stuff just isn't there so much. It's hard to explain.
It is. It may be hard to explain,
Yeah.
Jerry, but that's kind of where I come in.
Yeah,
Because I know exactly what you're talking about. So there is actually something that I think is pretty important about what we're doing here. And I don't know where things go. I'm not a fortune teller. But Jerry, this is some of the aspects of the key methodology that has been created here is not trying to control. Has anybody read the Tao Te Ching? Are you familiar with the Tao Te Ching at all? There's this passage in the Tao Te Ching that says, give up trying to control. Isn't that simple? It's a simple sentence, isn't it? Give up trying to control. Well, what does that mean? You know, how do we give up trying to control? I just read a meme on Facebook 15 or 20 minutes ago that says, the path to freedom is controlling your thought. The word control sneaks in. So
when you realize that you're doing it with this practice, when you realize that you get a feeling that you're putting conditions on it or you're trying to control it, that's when you use your rule of three. And
absolutely, because the attempt to control is a thought. Definitely. It may start as like an impulse. It may come from the body because of the tangled web that we've woven so far, but ultimately that will be perpetuated through thinking. So there's no way that if you're doing this practice, you will see that thought, and then you can cherry pick and continue with that thought, or you do the rule of three. And the rule of three is this practice. Does that make sense? So, Jerry, so what I'm talking about now is what I call the dissolving factor. We're not using force to change our behavior. That's why this is not cognitive behavioral therapy. Does that make sense? We are not using force. We are not trying to control behavioral change. Everything will be a result of one thing: the direction of your attention. If the direction of your attention is specific, deliberate, and on purpose, those old patterns of where your attention used to be dissolve. And I mean dissolve. You don't defeat them. You don't win a battle against them. That's the way that the male aggressive mind loves to talk. It wants to defeat, it wants to dominate, it wants to obliterate. And okay. No, what occurs with this practice is our attention is on purpose. So if my attention is deliberately on A, what happens to B? It has no frame of existence. I'm not creating it. I'm not generating it. So what Jerry is talking about is that when these old patterns start to come up, they're usually quicker. We recognize them faster. We readjust faster because we're doing the practice. And I would say that that's an indication that Jerry is working her practice. Is that you remember when we first started practicing, people would say, oh, I got angry, but it didn't last as long. It didn't sit with me as long. I didn't feel as angry. It's dissolving. Does that make sense? I guess you could say it was a type of social, sexual, weird, type of energy with people at the movie theater. I would see those people, outside of the movie theater afterwards, and those old feelings don't come up. They don't come up anymore because they have no more frame of reference in my experience. I'm not giving them the energy that they need to exist. You are creating your suffering. If you are psychologically suffering in any way, you are creating that. That is your garden. That is your output. That is your production. I'm not blaming and I'm not pointing fingers or anything. It happens to me, and probably, I don't want to put anybody in a box, but very likely is happening to all of us. Does that make sense, Jerry? So We're talking about the dissolving factor of this practice. Old habits, old ways of thinking, old ways of interacting with our own cognition. The old ways, if we're not giving it attention, will dissolve, will fall away, and it's not using force. So I don't leave the towel on the bed. That's not because I'm sitting here, using force and trying to control. I'm just aware of myself in as the moment's happening. And as I'm about to put the towel on the bed, I'm like, aha. And then eventually the impulse to do it just is gone. And the habit is gone. It's not reprogramming, it's not using force, it's not exercising control, it's not discipline. But people are always commenting about how disciplined my mind is. It's not discipline. We're not using discipline. The old habits will fall away. And I have habits that are still falling away. I imagine that will be true until I'm 110. I don't know for sure. But I'm not focusing on the habit or declaring war. I don't have to do that. Does that make sense?
I think the other thing too, thank you. I'm just kind of feeling a sense about right now is it's like, we don't know what we don't know, or a lot of the old reactions. It's like there's no memory to it. It's just, we notice what we notice because it's top of mind. It's where our mind is running. And when we start working a practice, I don't think I ever think, oh wow, I used to, there isn't that going on. It just isn't there anymore. You're just noticing in a whole new way, where the other just doesn't have a memory anymore. It just isn't there. Not all things, but just like you were describing, the just do energy.
Yeah.
You're just doing it in the moment.
So, I mean, that's kind of where my whiteboard was going to go. So if we have basic alignment, this is just basic practices. That, guess what? If you don't do it, it's not going to work. Like if you're just walking around, just thinking that, this is some sort of magic trick, this practice is never going to work for you. If you do not rule of three, this practice is never going to work for you, because that's what this practice is. That's why it worked for me, is the rule of three. It's one of the most important chapters in the book that I'm writing, because it's important. I mean, I don't know, I can't hustle you, and I can't offer you anything else other than the rule of three, because that's what I did. When I would see my mind going towards unproductive cognition, the only thing I could do to redirect was to place my mind deliberately with multiple points of attention, minimum of three. That's it. If you don't do that, this practice will never get past this first phase, basic alignment, which is fox walking, and that's great. 4 modes practice, that's awesome. Maybe you're doing other, esoteric practices. You're doing some yoga, or you're doing some, I don't know, Pilates, or you're getting your sexual chakras going with your Kundalini practices. It's all great. But this practice, after basic alignment, requires the rule of three. Does that make sense? If that's confusing, then I should not proceed in any other explanation. This practice, past basic alignment, requires the rule of three. Otherwise, you're being passive to your unproductive thought. You're just allowing it, and unconsciously allowing it. It's not even a cherry-picking choice. If this practice isn't occurring, you are oblivious. The thoughts are just occurring. A leaf at the mercy of the mind churning. Does that make sense? I don't know. The way you're talking about that, Jerry, makes it seem like there's something separate that becomes a. I don't know. I don't know. It's just, I can just tell you that this practice accumulates. When the atrophy effect dissolves, it becomes preferred. And I'm gonna show you some of the things. Okay. So let's say though that you are cool with the rule of three. You get it, and you're doing it. Now we get into counterbalance. Counterbalance is doing this practice. with the rule of three. It means every single time that you identify your thought is unproductive, you do the rule of three and you counterbalance back to the moment. That is a huge part of this practice. It could take years. I don't know. I don't want to put anybody in a box. Maybe it takes months. I'm not sure. But those are the first two stages of this practice. One of them, you're not doing the rule of three. And I don't know who's in that stage right now. You may think that you're you've been doing this practice and like you know it and you understand it, and you know, if you're not doing the rule of three, then this practice is not occurring past basic alignment. Does that make sense? Any questions about that before I go forward? Basic alignment is you're doing your rule of three. You recognize that you're in unproductive cognition, you rule of three, and you go back to a trick of attention. Mike, does that make sense? Karen, all good? This is basically
Makes sense to me.
That makes sense? Okay. And then something, if you choose, we really start to want to polish what Jerry was talking about, just do energy. I'm going to give you a bonus if you can tell me which part of this practice was fundamentally designed. Like I made the entire section of the practice for just do energy. What's it called? We did it for almost 2 years. It really only involves an
Warrior training.
Warrior training. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It involves an equation, and I clarify even further the traps of thinking and what needs to be redirected. So then we go into warrior training. Warrior training starts to develop just do energy. Just do energy is personal power, but just do energy is flow. Just do energy is perpetual flow. And I do have a trash can going, or a dumpster going through the alley. Welcome to Chicago. Did you hear how I said that, Shayna? I did that with the accent.
Yeah, you're working on your Chicago accent.
Chicago, yeah. Great Lake accent.
So your bedroom window is right there by the alley?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so cool.
We're in the midst. Like there's alleys on both sides, and it's everywhere. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you just like take your little webcam and just.
I tried. It's just
right
too bright,
around the
though.
window. Show us.
I tried.
Show us where you're at.
It's too bright. Oh wait, no.
Oh, you're gonna have to pick up the window. Okay. And then apartments up above and around.
Well, no, that's a resale
Oh, that's
store, and that's Sherman Williams paint store right there. Yeah, I'll take more pictures, but
Awesome.
yeah.
Thanks.
And this is getting to Jerry's question, because they were, you know, how fast our move was, how total our move was, how so far completely flawless everything has gone. So we're getting to answering that question, which is the creative power of this practice. It gets to something that we haven't talked much about, just because and this is fair statement, and it's no, you know, it's okay, but most of us are still in this area of training, and that's okay. Like I said, I was likely in that area of training for 10 or 15 years before I got to this next stage. And it's not really stages. It's such a weird way of talking about it, but I just don't have any other vocabulary. The more you do the practice, the more it accumulates. The more it accumulates, the more these other things start to reveal themselves. Does that make sense so far? The purpose of warrior training was for what? One purpose for warrior training, essentially. It is for what?
Reducing resistance.
Well, I mean, yes.
Personal power.
Personal power. The accumulation of personal power and just do energy. Intention and will to increase flow, to increase perpetual flow, and to be able to do it without wasting your time thinking about the future. You know, planning, okay. taking into consideration potential dangers and things that you need to consider, okay, that takes 2 minutes. Anything past that is getting into passive dysfunctional thought. Does that make sense? The start of this entire practice is starting to dissolve resistance, because resistance to what? I use the word resistance very deliberately. You can be in Las Vegas and on the high-flying disc and in an act of resistance. Does that make sense, Jerry? So I'm not saying, when I say resistance, I don't just mean you don't like it. You're having resistance to chores. That's not what I'm talking about. Although it is, but it's not just that. It's anytime the moment is not engaged with when the mind is not engaged with the moment. Anytime that you are not deliberately, intentionally, and willfully paying attention to the present moment, you are feeding the atrophy effect and you are resisting the moment. So if you're on a high-flying disc and you're woo-wooing because you got a trip to Las Vegas, or whatever you're woo-wooing about, you may very well be resisting the present moment in favor of all of the cognition. And hey, that's okay too. The longer you exist there, the more you're going to get attached. The more you get attached, the more you will psychologically and physically suffer. The choice is always ours. Even if we're not making the choice, we're just unconsciously acting out patterns. All right, so the practice is going to progress to something else, because there's a certain point where words just are not really all that important to you anymore. They're important for communication because human beings insist on talking, but the seer's training or the seer's practice now, I like the word practice because you're not really training anymore. Is the seer's practice. The seer's practice is feeling. It's all felt. At this point, we are not, you will still use the rule of three, you're just not doing it all the time. You're connected most of the time. You have now reverse engineered basic alignment to where it feels more comfortable to be present. It feels more comfortable to be engaged. It feels more comfortable to be in alignment with the moment happening now. It feels more comfortable to not be in resistance, but rather be engaged with the present moment. That begins to feel more comfortable and is more desired. Shana, did you have something?
It just came on mute. Sorry.
That's okay. Does that make sense? So could you imagine this move in the seer's practice, Jerry? What would that look like? What would a move or a desire, what would that look like in the seer's practice? Is there going to be...
Just like what you did. Just like what you did.
Just like what I did. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And there's a way that you can, training implies getting somewhere. It kind of does. Yeah. And the seer's practice is not that. It's just, I'll be doing this seer's practice when I'm 110. And then there's an effect from it that I call the hydrostatic effect. And when the hydrostatic effect exists, there's just do energy. And the hydrostatic effect. Everything becomes this. One part, I'm spelling initiative, or attempting to, so just imagine that spelled correctly. This was like, who is that? He was a real popular old guy. Another dead master of antiquity. What is that guy's name? I can't remember.
An old guy. I mean, can you narrow it down a little?
That's what I was thinking. A real
That's what
popular old guy.
He was an
Okay.
old
Oh, we're
guy.
talking super old, like old statues old. Starts with an M.
Confucius.
No, not Confucius was Chinese. Merciless. Mike? Something. Mercules or something. Shit. It'll come to me.
Meerkats?
No.
Meerkat.
The guy who did all the prophecies, that one.
Not Nostradamus, no.
Oh,
It is like it's like Miracles. I don't know. Anyway, I stole this. But I know where it was coming from. I can see it now. So hydrostasy is flow. It is 50% or one part the initiative of your attention, the direction of your attention, not trying to control, not thinking, just the direction of your attention. And because we're involved with other people, letting things occur on their own, not trying to control other people. Does that make sense? And then you get a lot of what you saw, and I can give you more detail, but in some ways it almost sounds like bragging and boasting, so I just prefer to answer questions. But ultimately in the hydrostasy practice, when you're feeling that balance, and remember hydrostasy, I'm never outside of my peace. So I never lose peace. Even though maybe I get a little bit here and a little bit there, I don't let myself exist in an extreme. Because of my practice, I'm present, I'm mindful, I'm deliberately intending the direction of my attention. That's it. The third pillar is active all the time. And because the third pillar is active, I can just focus on the step right in front of me and just fucking do. And what does that look like? It looks like selling your house, having a buyer in one day, moving to a different city, Shayna getting exactly the job that she wanted. I got exact, and that's a little bit of letting things occur on their own too, because that was, not completely up to Shayna. But if she didn't ask, if she didn't do things in a certain order, it could have ended up differently. She would have tried to be deceitful, or she wouldn't have been as upfront and honest and communicative. But she followed, the feeling. She did what was in alignment, following the feeling, not just the thought of everything. And everything just worked out. We got the perfect apartment. We got the perfect location. We got everything that we wanted. It's all working out for us, and it will continue to because of the just do energy. So the way it looks physically, and yeah, there's actually a physical representation of this. Does this whiteboard make sense? Can I erase it? Basic alignment, no rule of three. Counterbalance, a whole lot of fucking rule of three. Warrior training, very specific rule of three to create just do energy to help accumulate personal power. Seer's practice is the feeling of the world, the third ring. Seer's practice, you are in the third ring most of the time. And then hydrostasy is an effect where you're always in peace. It's inner peace. Hydrostasy is the effect of inner peace. And personal power, the ability to create, which is what the human being is here to do, is create. How do I know that? Because we were born doing it. We will die doing it. Everything on earth is doing it. The stars itself is doing it. The earth itself is doing it. Everything is in a process of creation. Human beings have the God factor, the infinite spark, where human beings can intentionally, purposefully, willfully direct attention. So we have that creative factor that I'm not sure every animal has. And what that is we would call that the awareness of self, or actualization, self-actualized. We are aware of our place in the universe. Not all of us. In general, there's about 7 billion people who are not. They're just acting out unconscious habits, no different than a squirrel or a bird. Well, some birds. There's actually some birds that show signs of actualization as well, the infinite spark. Okay, so what was I going to show you? Oh yeah, so the human body, and this is going to be a dorky looking picture, but that's okay. That's why we have Ida. Ida can take any dorky looking picture and make it into a beautiful painting of art. But it does have a physical representation, although I certainly hope that nobody gets caught up on the physical representation. But the stick figure is a human being. Oh. Undo. That's not an arm. Need a better arm. And now I'm going to draw points of attention that I call the golden line. So the golden line, crown, heart, Dantian. Now there are other points on the on the golden line that I've added. It's kind of always been there, but I'm just being more specific to help you with your practice. Palms of the hand, soles of the feet. These may look like Indian chakras. This isn't the chakra system. This is different. This is what I call the golden line. So this is the crown, but you can do the throat as well, and you can do what people would call the third eye area. So there's now multiple points. There's always been, but I'm clarifying this for you. What occurs is what I call the hydrostasy effect of balance. You create a circle of peace. And from that circle comes the ability to adapt. Adaptation comes from the Dantian. That's where you feel the power of the movement. That's why in movement exercises, there's so much focus on the Dantian, and that space in the body is consistent in different cultures who are separated by space and time. And then spirit rises. This is the creative factor. This creative factor is like a light switch. If you have just due energy, it flows through the body. The body becomes essentially an instrument of perception and an instrument of creation. And that's, Jerry, what you saw. That's what occurred with Shayna and I and this move. It was just creative energy, just creative power. And there's a way to physically direct that with attention. Everything is just a matter of attention. You can even direct personal power using just attention itself. Not if it's not there, and not if you're counterbalancing your own mind. This is impossible if you're still counterbalancing. And it's not levels, it's not stages, it's just you're either doing it and it's accumulating, or you're doing something else and that's accumulating. Do you see what I mean? You're either unconscious with your attention and you're accumulating what you've been accumulating for the whole life, or you're directing your attention and you're accumulating personal power and just do energy. And if that's in alignment, all of your desires are expressed. You don't have to sit there and think about it. Your interaction with the world and how you want to express yourself is expressed. You don't have to think about it. Thinking is for communication, not trying to understand. Understanding occurs as a feeling. Insight occurs as a feeling. Intuition and intelligence occurs as a feeling. And if every human being was operating in this way, we wouldn't be judging each other. We wouldn't be trying to control each other. We wouldn't need laws. We wouldn't be so confused. We wouldn't be paying all this money to all of these mythical gurus to teach us all of these things, when really all we ever had to do from the beginning is be deliberate with our attention. That's it. And we're born doing that. We're born in flow. Our attention is ours until, as parents and society, we start to direct their attention. We're carving their attention for them. And then it's a done deal. Attention is just attached to the ebb and flow of the world around them unconsciously. Does that make sense? And that is the reason that the human species is in so much suffering, is because they're not deliberately paying attention to the present moment. Because the attention is a leaf at the mercy of the wind, most humans, their block is being carved for them without their permission. And before you know it, you have beliefs that are not yours. You have actions that are not yours. You're doing things that are not yours. Does that make sense? And so that is an example, Jerry. Yeah. She doesn't bark too much. She's been doing really good. So I don't know, maybe just because I'm talking or... All right, any questions?
Yeah. I was just going to say, yes, it does make sense. Very much.
And what does that mean, though, if something like doesn't go your way? I have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. How long did it take me to get those plans? 2 minutes. Like, plans come as ideas. When people say that they're planning, 9 times out of 10, they're just trying to control. They're trying to control the future. They're trying to make sure adaptation is the principle, not trying to make sure. I had this apartment and another apartment and another apartment and another apartment. What are the chances of me not getting all 4 apartments? I had this job. Right now, I still have 2 jobs because I don't know. Maybe the Sunnyside job doesn't come through all the way. Maybe I don't get my badge. And so I'll, do my CBD job that I got. I have plan A, plan B, plan C. They just come to me. I don't have to try to control. I have options.
And what you're not doing is overthinking it. All the what ifs and the crap, the what ifs and the worry it just mucks everything up.
I am absolutely not doing that. Yes. None of that. It's not even, Jerry, remember we talked about kind of different phases of accumulation. I don't even feel pulled to do that. And I don't want to speak for Shayna. Maybe she did. Maybe there were times where she felt the pull to want to think about it, to worry about it, I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but
Yeah, I would say definitely in the beginning when it was all happening so quickly, there was the pull to go in that direction. But yeah, I had to definitely go back to rule of 3 and a lot of that because it was exhausting for sure.
And you could see how well it worked, Shayna, when you did it, when you did the rule of 3.
Yeah, it was a lot of rule of 3s because it was a lot of it was out of my comfort zone, like you mentioned earlier. There was a lot of I really recognized where comfort was in that moment, how comfortable I was. And when we were doing all of this, there was a lot of things that took me out of that comfort zone. And I had to really rule of 3 and stop looking into the future so much because that's where my mind wanted to go, is trying to attempt to control and figure it out.
yeah, and we live in a world that wants to perpetuate and exist opposite extremes. So you have some people who are like, you have to be uncomfortable all the time or you're not growing. Have you ever heard that, Jerry? If you're comfortable, you're not growing. So constantly forcing themselves. Freedom is to be comfortable or uncomfortable and still feel free. So there's going to be times where we're uncomfortable and we still feel free. There's going to be times where we feel comfortable and we still feel free. And then there's the balance. And so people just go from one extreme to the other to where now they're constantly, and then before you know it, they're jumping out of airplanes and trying to scale buildings with no ropes. And if that's the thing, fine. But sometimes that's literally just chasing. And I don't chase. I let everything come to me.
And that really is an example of possibly cherry picking. I might be using the wrong word, but yes, a lot of us, not speaking for you, but yeah, you experienced some real discomfort that did propel you based on those things you shared with us. And a lot of us have had that. That's contrast. We decide we don't like that. We don't want to be there.
I loved where I was.
You're talking about pain, anxiety, just, discomfort.
Okay.
Yeah. And that people say, you were saying, haven't you heard that people say you've got to feel pain or,
right.
or whatever to grow? But it doesn't mean you don't need to stay there. Now, that isn't where you want to be. So no, I don't need to continue going back to pain to grow. No, I just know I don't want to be there.
Exactly. And if there is some growing pain, it just is. And you just grow. And, but to seek the growing pain is, again, it's attaching to an opposite extreme. And it's just another attempt to control, and it ultimately will just lead to more psychological suffering. It's not an answer. And you see a lot of that in the world today. The world wants to go to opposite extremes and cling to the opposite extreme. All of that is a hustle. The opposite extreme is always a hustle. Sorry, not sorry, but I'll say it.
And then there's also that feeling when you do feel your comfort zone where you kind of get that feeling, do I want to go out of my comfort zone? What do I really want? That feeling. So there's that I need to chase the extremes. And then the other one's like, I feel pretty comfortable. Is this all really necessary type of thing? And you kind of have to, look at what your desire, because we did have an actual desire. And if that desire pushes me out of my comfort zone for a little bit, then so be it. So yeah, that's kind of how I was. It's like, we're pretty comfortable here. We don't really have to, everything's nice, but I do have a desire to do something. So let's do it.
There you go. Just do. So so I have said before that everything is a matter of attention. If you can imagine the human body, use your imagination for a minute, that is not in resistance. Mike, I'm gonna pick on you. Are you there? We're not leaving until Mike answers. Mike, are you there? I want to pick on somebody. Mike's not letting me pick on him. Who's it? Okay, Mike, are you there?
I'm in. I'm here.
I'd like you to imagine a mind and body that is not resisting the present moment. That means that they're either doing this practice, or they're a brand new born baby, or they're on an island somewhere where they haven't been taught all of this dysfunction, and they're deliberately, consciously aware of the present moment. Their mind is not resisting the present moment in favor of thought. Can you imagine that person?
Yes.
That person is connected to the moment. They're feeling the moment. The moment is revealing itself to them constantly. They're not bored. They're enjoying everything. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it storms. Not everything goes that person's way, but they adapt. They don't go off into the unnecessary cognition. They're not tripping over themselves because they're not in resistance. When this occurs, the energy in the body begins to flow naturally. Sometimes what people are doing in yoga, what they're doing in Tai Chi, what they're doing in Kundalini classes, they're attempting to manipulate, and they're maybe not using that word, but they're attempting to do something with that energy. They're trying to use it somehow, or they're trying to direct it. And I think that's okay. I'm not going to declare war on those practices. I don't know about everything, so that's fine. But what I am suggesting, Mike, is that when the mind is not in resistance, the energy begins to flow naturally, like we were born into this world. The body begins to flow, the energy begins to flow, and we start to feel general wellness. If we're looking at the practice, when we're in seers training, you are always feeling general wellness. It's there. I feel well. Maybe I'm a little sicky. I feel well. Maybe I'm a little sad. I feel well, because there's peace. Can you imagine this person? Their energy is flowing. Can we imagine that right now? Mike, are you there with me so far? This person probably isn't going to argue with you. They're probably not going to, get angry with you. They're not going to try to control you. If you have a question, they're going to listen. Stuff like that. They're probably good friends. So if I go back to my board, they're probably very adaptable. That's what this swirl is coming from the Dantian Mike. That's adaptability. Does that make sense? So they're very adaptable. Their bubble of perception, which is this circle, the big circle around the body, is active. I call that the bubble of perception, the hydrostatic effect. You feel balanced. Could you imagine walking through your day? You're balanced, you're focused, you're doing. It's all good. Maybe everything isn't going your way. Maybe you missed the train, but you're still focused. You're still balanced. You're not creating issues. Next time you'll leave 10 minutes earlier. It's fine. You see what I mean? So this person is still flowing in this example. Mike, Jerry, you guys with me in this example?
Absolutely.
And then something happens. And this is an effect. This is the hydrostatic effect. This is something that occurs. The Chinese, and maybe I'm not talking about the same thing, but it reminds me when they say spirit rising, there is alignment that occurs to you and everything else around you. Does this make sense, Mike? Are you with me so far? It feels like behind the head, like I'm giving you I'm telling you how it feels. It feels like brightness. It feels like that halo around the head. It feels like energy. It feels like this is a feeling that's either occurring or it's not, though. I'm not just talking about abstract, philosophical, woke stuff. I'm talking about a feeling that occurs when the mind is not in resistance, when personal power is flowing and chi and energy is flowing in the body naturally. It is tangible. Does that make sense so far? Now, Mike, are you with me? Can you imagine all that? They're flowing, probably healthy. Energy is probably pretty good. They're not aging quite the same as everyone else. With me so far? In that type of alignment, when that is occurring, when that is flowing, the next step is to, with awareness and attention, just attention, and where you look, you direct it, just like we've been directing our attention, right? We've been doing it from day one, right, Jerry? We've been directing our attention. Isn't that right? Isn't that what a trick of attention is? You are directing your attention, so you know what that feels like.
And when you start doing it without so much thinking, it just changes the game. You've changed the game.
What I'm saying is that when that energy is flowing, when there's no resistance in the body and the mind, and this takes time, it takes practice, the atrophy effect must go away. It can't be there. You still might need to counterbalance in rule of 3, because I'll be 110 and still subject to these principles. Probably won't be doing it very often. I can admit that. So I'll be 110 and still doing my practice, still subject to the rule of 3. And if spirit is rising, if there is that connection made, I only need to direct my attention and will be done. Does that make sense? You look that way, you go that way. You look that way, you create that way. It is the flashlight of attention, is the architect. It is the creating mechanism, is simply attention itself. So I can direct my attention and I can feel happiness. I can direct my attention and I can feel relaxed. I can direct my attention and feel sexual. I can direct my attention and feel creative. I can direct my attention and feel whatever I want. And it is literally just a matter of the direction of my attention. But I do mean that somewhat literally. If I want to open my heart, I put attention on the heart space. And when I'm in this flow, it just opens. I'm not controlling it. I'm not manipulating it. It's just a matter of attention, and everything goes that way. That's a principle of nature. It's not my fault. Squirrels, the direction that they look, everything is going that way for them. Wherever Ida looks, whatever she's paying attention to, the whole universe is going that way for her. Same for me. And so you become the architect, the conscious creator. And you are literally just doing it as a matter of intention and will. Do you think I was questioning the move and can I do this and how do I? No. It is just do energy. I have plan A, plan B, plan C. I can't lose. Just do, one foot in front of the other. It is actualization. Yes. And the mind that is actualized, that's that spirit rising, actualized, present, mindful, and deliberately intending the direction of attention at all times. I'm not going to apologize if people think that that's not possible. It does take practice, but it is possible. I maintain attention on my body multiple points now, all the time. From the time that I wake up, from the time that I go to bed. It is possible. And Ida, Shayna, I'm sure there's others. You guys are experiencing much more than you did before. So why can't we assume that that will continue to increase, that you'll continue more and more and more and more to be present, mindful, and deliberately intending the third pillar. That's all this practice is just the third pillar. It's so simple, but it can result in so much. Unobstructed flow. We don't need to manipulate our chi. We don't need to manipulate. If you do, because you're maybe addressing a specific thing that you've created, like liver cancer, or I don't know, and you have a technique, do your techniques, save yourself. But we wouldn't need those techniques if we had never gone out of that flow. We're born in that natural flow. Does that make sense? And I think it's important to transition to something new, aka die in that flow. I think that's important, and I don't know why. I can't put that into words. I do think it's important. That would seem like an opinion to anyone else, though, and I'm okay with that. Any questions, comments, concerns? So Jerry, you wondered about the move and how things are occurring, and just do. I'm going to change up the Mindspace Academy. It's constantly changing. I have a new idea. I have something else that I want to do, and I think it's more in alignment. And yeah, so I'm going to do that.
I wasn't being quite that gracious with it. I really wasn't interested in your practice. I was interested in your personal life. Where are you walking? What's your living room look like?
Oh, okay.
What do there are tall buildings across. I'm very visual that way with my practice, and I picture that alley there, and then some buildings over there, and then when you walk downstairs, is there a little doggy area? Just all those little details. I'm just being Snoopy, but yeah, I do care about your practice.
There's 2 international airports in Chicago. You guys can fly in and fly out, but you can't stay here because we have a tiny apartment. But
right on.
We are in fox walking paradise, Jerry. That's the moral of the story. I love fox walking, so there's so much walking here. And if I get tired, I just jump on the L and go home. I don't even have to walk if I don't want to.
Oh, just give me a bench downtown there. You said you're within minutes of restaurants. If there's a bench there, oh my gosh, I would have to sit on that bench. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
everything is a combination of walking and sitting. Those are my favorite activities. So what am I doing? I'm creating a life that I desire, one that I can walk and I can feel free and I can just do my thing,
You don't drive there then? You're not driving much?
No.
No?
It's not a good place to drive around.
Yeah, I thought that might be.
Yeah, the stores are just like a mile away. So like the grocery stores and all the restaurants are like within walking distance. So you'll lose your parking spot if you drive around.
That's also, I'll give you an example. That's an expression of personal principles and desire, Jerry, Ida, because it was my desire, and Shayna knows this, is to be within walking distance of where I work, and I want to be able to walk to places. I think, we're using a lot of fuel, and we are damaging our environment because of our travel, at least to some extent. I'm not going to get into the science and because that's not my lane. But I do agree that, it's important to take these things into consideration. That's my personal principles.
Yeah, we have like 7 grocery stores within a mile of the apartment, so we can walk. Yeah.
And so do you see, without thinking about it, I'm only just now talking about it to you, but do you see how the desire is in alignment with the personal principle? The personal principle is in alignment with the universal principle, and it's just due energy. It's the architect creating exactly what you want, how you want to. Oh no, we go into. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. What'd you say?
We don't just curbside pickup. We go in places.
Oh yeah, but I meant you could. I mean, if it's like, maybe you have plans, you're running a little tight on time, you might just do a curbside and grab it and
easy
walk
peasy.
back.
Yeah. The only place that I've been driving to is for my laundry, so I don't have to carry the heavy bag. So I just park the car, pick up the laundry, and then I go to a laundromat that has a parking lot.
Do you probably drive to work, or is that
No.
close? Oh, you walk to work.
I can walk to work.
Oh, awesome.
I start Wednesday at the CBD shop, and if that's because Sunnyside requires me to be bad.